Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Fanatics video on the channel. Pre-season is heating up and we've got rookies to discuss, which is arguably the most important video of the pre-season, to see which rookies will dictate our structure as the motto goes around the AFL Fantasy community. I'm your host, Bales, and you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials. And joining me, I thought this was very, very fitting to get this man on. Couldn't make it a couple of weeks ago, but we've thought we'd get him on as well to chat rookies. It is the rookie expert and the man you know does the Fry's Cash Cows article on DT Talk. It is Fry from Sports by Fry podcast. Fry, mate, how are you going? How's the preseason shaping up for you, mate? Not long to go.
Yeah, I know, mate. Thanks for having me on. Apologies, couldn't make it a few weeks ago, but I'm glad we can get this chat in before opening round and before we get the fantasy season kicking off. Pre-season has been going well. I think like all the coaches, I've been trimming my squad from 50 to 40. Now I'm feeling pretty confident with about 85% of it, I reckon. But after our lengthy pre-pod chat about trying to find money for Harry Sheezel, I think these rookies are going to be very important for our structure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Shees was definitely the one that's come into discussion, but it wasn't that long ago that he was a rookie for us, which is crazy.
That's true.
But so who knows? Maybe one of these guys we're going to chat about today may be Harry Shees, and a couple. Well, probably not to that level, to be honest. But if they're going pretty well, then you never know. But we're going to go through. So plan for today. Obviously, this is the must-have rookies episode. So obviously, getting Fry's expert opinion to see which rookies we should be having. We're going to go through each line: defenders, mids, and forwards. I don't think there's too much to touch with on the rucks. We're going to go through the main sort of 2 or 3 rookies to consider, group a bunch and see what Fry's thoughts are. Then we'll give our top 3 ranks for each position. And then later on, we'll say who we've got on field in our current teams as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. So make sure you guys smash a like on the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So let's get straight into the defender rookie. So funny enough, I think we're going to be starting almost at pretty much basement, I feel like. I think like the 2 guys that have got a bit of buzz at the moment in defence has been James Leake, who was the number 1 CBA attendee from their game against Carlton, and then Zach Reid, who's been pretty much locked into that Sydney Essendon back 6 in the preseason. Looked pretty good with job security. Scoring, I guess, is the question. So, Fry, what are your thoughts on a James Leake and a Zach Reid? And can you play one of those 2 guys on your field at D6?
Well, I'd feel risky playing them on my field, but as it sits right now, both of them are in my defensive bench spots. There's a couple of characters from the most recent draft who we had a bit of hope in, but they didn't really deliver over the weekend. I was skeptical of Zach Reid, as a key defender. I did wonder how many points would be on offer, but he looked great against the Cats, and I think that he's going to be a great cash cow for us in defence. Let's hope he can stay on the park. And similar with Leakey, he obviously didn't play a bit of that match sim against the Swans a little while back, but as you said, led the CBAs. I think hopefully with Tom Green out, there's going to be a bit of a role there. You could get away with it, and it would help save a lot of money that you can use elsewhere by playing one of them at your D6, especially because there's not too many defensive rookies that we trust at the moment. But yeah, I'd feel much safer picking both of them on your bench, and hopefully they can play their role over the first half of the season.
Exactly. And when you've got these early buy players, you'll potentially have both of them covering,
because
obviously they've got the rounds 2 buy and rounds 4 buy. So not only is it good for the double price rise in round 1, if they both play obviously an opening round and score well enough, but then they'll be able to cover in round 3 when we've got the likes of your Harry Perrymans, your Matt Roberts, your Sam de Konings, if we start a guy like him, Max Holmes, a few people maybe dabbling in along with a Houston sort of type. So they could be quite good. And I guess the thing with Zach Reid is he was the second highest kick taker for Essendon, barring obviously Mason Redmond wasn't there. But they have said that they like Zach Reid on kicking. So I probably expect him to take a couple a game, depending on how many they get a game. So I feel like I agree that probably both are on the bench. Do you feel like Leakey's probably the one, though, that could be a bit of a smoky that you could put on field with this midfield role?
Yeah, out of the 2, I would, if you had to pick one of them to play on the field, it's probably Leake ahead of Reid. You do wonder, with the likes of Ridley, Redmond, McGrath, even Nick Martin with he drifts back. There's a lot of those speedy types that love to rack up +6s. I'm sure he'll get on the chain when they're switching the ball from one end to the other, but I'd feel safer picking Leakey, especially if he's going to be in and around the pill in the midfield a lot more. But yeah, I think personally they're both best suited as bench picks, but depends on how you structure up the rest of your team.
Yeah, exactly. The two you did mention though that we had a couple of these higher drafted rookies in our teams for a lot of the preseason, but unfortunately, Toby Travalia, who has played 2 games and has come on I think the third quarter in the game against Port, then he came on the last quarter against Carlton. He screams green vest to me. He seems like they like him for his impact, and I know they've got a few injuries, but when he's not playing even a full game, he's either not going to be there or sub. And then even a Bo Allen, who will be probably there, but when you're scoring 13 points from 73% game time and you had a -6 point quarter in there, definitely not on field. I guess the question for Bo Allen is, can you still pay up for him on the bench, or is your Leak and a Reed, I guess, better for value? And do you start one of them on field and have Bo Allen on the bench? So firstly, Travali, if you agree with that, and then your thoughts on a Bo Allen.
Yeah, Travalia, I'm a little bit disappointed because I was super confident that he was going to be our D6. I thought coming out of the draft, he was going to be a player that could develop and do wonders at St Kilda. But I can also understand the bloke's a teenager and he's being eased into his AFL career. So that obviously threat of a sub-vest probably draws a line through him for me. Even if he is picked in round 1 and he's not given a vest, I wonder if he'll be a sub-off candidate. There may be a couple of injuries, as you mentioned, that give him a little bit more leeway. But yeah, at this stage, there's too many red flags for me to probably pick him, which is a shame because I really rate the kid and think he could do wonders. Maybe he'll even lose us a little bit of cash given his inflated starting price, and we can grab him for under 300 grand. That's me being a bit of a devil's advocate. But yeah, I don't think you can be picking Travalia to start the year. And Bo Allen, I thought there were some moments against North that he actually played well, did good, smart footy things, for lack of a better term. But I just wonder if he's going to be a 40, 45 average type of guy. I'm flirting with putting him in my ability who has DPP, so I can swing around. And I think Allen's going to have great job security. It seems like West Coast is going to play him a lot in year 1. So out of the two, I'm leaning towards picking Allen purely for the bit of security in his role and job security. But if I had to pick who's the better fantasy player, given if they were playing full minutes, it's probably Travalia. So there's obviously risks with both of them. I may even axe Allen and use that cash elsewhere. But yeah, 2 touted rookies that I was hoping would get a lot of buzz roll over from the preseason into round 1, but doesn't seem like it's going to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like maybe Bo Allen's probably one that I feel like these guys you can jump on if they have a good game, but it's almost like we haven't seen enough to put them in. So I currently don't have either in my team, and I think just if you've got the 2 bench rookies in a Reed and Leak, I think they're arguably better. They get the double price rise round one as well. If they obviously aren't the sub, they're all and when I say sub, I mean James Leak if he's a sub, but. No one's CBA 10 in the game.
See something like if Sam DeConing or one of these other blokes you got at D5 or D6 after a few weeks doesn't look like the right guy, hopefully, then maybe we could jump on Travalia after he's had a couple of sub-started games or something of the sort, or even, once the early buys are done and we get to like round 5 or 6, we're not ruling them out for the entire season. But yeah, there's a couple of red flags that I think just means we should probably steer clear to start the year at least.
Yeah, no, really, really good point. We've got another 2 names here as well that are just over the 300K mark that aren't really rookies, but they're rookie priced, in a Jackson Pryor and a Luke Cleary, who Luke Cleary is probably the one that sort of popped his head up in that game, scored 79 points there. And Jackson Pryor scored, I think, 63 or 67 it might have been. Had a slow start in that game, a bit of more of a lockdown, but got going as the game went on. Probably a bit more comfortable getting used to that, obviously, the Essendon system. One of these guys worth paying up for a D6 or even a D7 if you may put one of these defenders in utility if you're trying to cover these early buy guys. What are your thoughts on a Jackson Pryor and a Luke Cleary?
Full disclosure, I got Jackson Pryor sitting at D6 after Travalia and Allen failed over the weekend. I've made room for the bloke, so I'm dramatically hopeful that he can deliver on that inflated rookie price. We're starting to increase the salary cap, so a bloke that's 360 grand is still considered a rookie. But he put up some great numbers for Brisbane's VFL side last year, albeit probably in a bit of a different role. But there's been a lot's a stretch, but there's been some good news and good reports out of Essendon's preseason about what he brings to that back line. So at the moment,
take the Jake Kelly role. That's what I've pretty much heard.
Yeah, and I think I watched him kick the footy a few times in the preseason game and was like, I don't know why this bloke's foot skills are being rated as elite, but that was a sample size of, call it 10 disposals. So if we do see prior pop in opening round, I expect his ownership to dramatically climb. Cleary's an interesting one. He was a player that I remember keeping tabs on throughout the last couple of years after he came into the system, and he's obviously a beneficiary of Bailey Dale missing, but I do wonder, is he going to be there round one? Like if I'm Luke Beveridge, I wouldn't feel great picking Cleary in my team. No offense to the bloke, but I just wonder if there's going to be a couple of inconsistent scores from him. Averaged about 75 in the VFL last year, but I still think he needs a little bit more time to develop into an AFL footballer. So it's my personal 2 cents. So I'm Pryor over Cleary. And at this stage, if you were flirting with having one of those guys on your bench, I'd probably rather the extra 100, 130 grand and picking Leake and Reed. And then you can use that cash, obviously, to upgrade an on-field position that hopefully leads to more points.
Yeah, so it's pretty much a pry for you, or you're going down probably a bit cheaper. So just some of the other guys here, because we could touch on all of them, but for obviously time, we've got to go to other positions. I'll just sort of list off these names that people have been looking at in the preseason, and obviously you can either quickly run through them when we go through them, or you can just sort of pick your couple of favourites here. But obviously Tajway Woden didn't come until last quarter. A few people have been keen on him. Probably not going to be there if he's going to be maybe sub if he's there. Carl Warner's there as well. He didn't come on, I think, until later in the game yesterday. Or he might not have actually played. I can't actually remember. So you better probably tell me about that, Fry. O'Connor O'Sullivan as well, played the first half, didn't score great, had 8 handballs for like 10 points. So is he going to be a consistent scorer for us? Luke Traynor came on the second half and looked pretty good against Collingwood, but obviously he's not going to be scoring, what is that, like a 96 every week if you times that by 2. So it's probably a bit less than that. But he is an option potentially that we can consider there. Then you look at a Sardell Hawley, probably not going to be there. It's no emergency. Josh Gibkiss is injured. And then you've got guys like Liam O'Connell, who looked okay for St Kilda, might get a game early. They're probably not going to be a huge scorer. Riley Bice as well, probably pushed out when a few of those Sydney guys come back. And I believe that's probably most of them there. And Ben Jepson's probably not going to be there in round 1. He came on a bit later in the game. But any of those guys stick out to you? Either feel free to sort of go through a couple of names, or if you want to quickly go through the ones you remember and whatever. But what are your thoughts on that sort of list of guys that I just listed there?
To summarize all of them quickly, don't love most of them. There's a couple that could offer a little bit of upside. Riley Bice is the name that registers the most interest for me, purely because he showed great pedigree in the VFL last year from a fantasy standpoint. Is he in Sydney's best 22 or 23 even? Probably not. So we might have to wait on Bice, and he might be someone that we view around the buys if injuries start to stack up for the Swans. Carl Warner, as a Dockers fan, is someone that I really want to see in Freo's best team, but Longmuir prefers to have guys like Brandon Walker and Corey Wagner. So if Warner is in the team, he only came on in like a sub role yesterday against Melbourne, so I could see him doing that again in round 1 against Geelong, but probably not someone that we're considering to start. O'Sullivan
appears to come back in as well.
Yeah, exactly. O'Sullivan, Woden, Jepson maybe shows a little bit, and I wonder if a couple of injuries could create opportunity for him, but don't love a lot of them.
Luke Traynor?
Luke Traynor, that was the one I was going to say. So I think as a key tall, he reminds me, ironically, a lot of Josh Gibkiss, who hasn't really got a clean run thanks to injury, but he could be someone that emerges as a bench candidate. And I don't know if he's going to get a Guernsey round 1. It might be that, he comes on, plays a bit of a sub role, or he's just applies his craft in the state league for a couple of weeks. I think that would be best suited for his development, is just to get him to compete in the 2s for a while and then come into Richmond's team round, call it 3 or 4, something of that sort. But he's a player that I really rate. Of someone that I was surprised slipped a little bit on draft night. I thought he'd be a top 15 pick, but yeah, I really rate Luke Traynor, and he does have a bit of ability to be a swingman and kind of go to either end. So while, in a key defensive post, he might not rack up stats, if Richmond gets desperate and decides that they want to swing him forward, he is capable of playing there as well. So that might bode well for his job security into the future. So yeah, of those characters you mentioned, probably feel the best on Luke Traynor, but on all of them, I don't have a ton of confidence that they'll be performing well for us. Tajway Wonen as well, before I wrap up. I remember having him in my team last year, had him emergency maybe for a game against Brisbane, had a 70 odd. I was like, I'm a genius. This game's easy. And then I don't think he shook the sub vest for the rest of the year and struggled to top 40 points. So I think he'll play a similar role in 2025 for the D's if he is in their best team.
Yeah, because he can play most positions. He can play in defence, part forward, part on a wing. So he's probably a good player as a sub. And I love how you say characters as well. By the way, that's one thing that I do like. The one player I didn't mention though that did get a game was Jed Adams for Melbourne yesterday. Didn't score amazing, but Melbourne seemed to like chipping the ball around. And I wonder if he's a Blake Howes 2.0 that pops a 70 or an 80 in round one. But is he probably someone you'd rather jump onto and maybe downgrade to and put a Reed or a Leak on the field or someone like that than starting with him?
Yeah, I think from memory, we probably picked Blake Howes last year because he had that good round zero score. Yeah, and I don't think, like Adams, I just had a quick look, he averaged 35 in the VFL last year. Yeah. So I think if he does come into their best 22, he's probably going to be that guy averaging sub 40. So I probably want a little bit more eye test just to see exactly what type of fantasy scores he's capable of, because history and his resume suggest that he's not going to be worth it.
Yeah, agreed. Ranks. So your ranks for you for the top 3 defender rookies. What would be your order in terms of that?
It's a really good question because, to be honest, like we've rattled off maybe a dozen, maybe more names here, and there's probably only 4 or 5 that I'd feel confident having in my team. And some of them obviously come associated with flags. So I still think I'm bullish on Pryor because it seems like he's got a spot in that Essendon team. So if he scores well in opening round, like I said, I expect his ownership to climb dramatically and coaches to shuffle and put him at D6. So I'll put him at 1 at the moment. I would put Travalia 2 if it wasn't for the role issues and potential sub risk. So as a result, I'll bump him down a bit, go James Leake 2, Zach Reid 3, and then we can have Travalia and Allen round out a top 5.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'd probably agree with I think top 3 here for me, I think it's probably Pryor, Leake, and Zach Reid. I think I'd have Reid just behind Leake, just I guess Leake with the upside of the midfield role. But they're probably the common 3. If Pryor goes well in opening round, that's probably going to be the normal common 3 that people have, 1 on field in a Pryor, and then the other 2 on the bench there as well. Moving to the midfield now, where we had a plethora of options to begin pre-season, but a few of them dropped like flies, unfortunately. Unfortunate injuries to Sam Lawler with a hairline fracture in his jaw, obviously with that with the clash with Jinby. He's touch and go for round 1, but I'll get your thoughts in a sec, but I just don't think we can start a guy that he looked fantastic, but he's obviously hasn't had a full pre-season being managed at the start as well. Jagger Smith, unfortunate ACL. He will be seeing all the whole year, which is very, very unfortunate. He was locked in, I think, for all of us on ground. So hopefully Jagger recovers well and we'll get to see him next year in our fantasy teams. And then Josh Smiley was the other one that was one that people were keen on, and he's had a hamstring injury and is someone that's probably not gonna be. Well, he's out for the first few weeks of the season, so not someone we're going to be starting. But then going through obviously the names at the very top, I feel like that the top 3 are probably almost clear at the moment, and that's Finn O'Sullivan, Levi Ashcroft, and Harvey Langford. Harvey Langford with, I guess, a few questions in terms of the role yesterday, but with the other guys in a Finn O'Sullivan played halfback for the second half, which was very, very exciting as fantasy coach to see. And Levi Ashcroft just fit in seamlessly for Brisbane last week. What are your thoughts on those? And then I obviously mentioned Harvey Langford. What are your thoughts on those 3 guys? And are they the clear sort of top 3 mid rookies for you?
Yeah, I think so. Touching on the 3 injured blokes really quickly, I think if Lawler plays, I'm going to be very tempted to pick him for round 1. I loved what I saw for in the practice game against West Coast, but we'll wait and see. Jagger Smith, hopefully he's a basement price pick for us next year. The sicko in me keeps thinking. And then Josh Smiley, hopefully he can be a downgrade a couple of weeks after he has his hamstring injury. But because those blokes have kind of fallen by the wayside, you're right. I think it really is Levi Ashcroft, Finn O'Sullivan, and Harvey Langford taking up the 3 rookie on-field spots. Some coaches might be doing 2 or 1, but I think that those 3 are the top 3 for a reason. Ashcroft, as you said, fit in seamlessly in that preseason hit out against your boys. He wowed, looks great. Set up a pretty elite goal as well over the preseason. I remember him kind of soccering it out of midair. So I think he's just going to be a gun and a freak. So I'm not too deterred by the fact that he has an early buy. One of the few rookies in this group that we talk about who does have an early buy. I don't think we should overthink it. and try to fade him. I think he's going to be, if not the best cash cow of the year, one of.
You get 2 cracks at it anyway in round 3.
Exactly.
You have him on field. Yeah. You get to look at 2 rookies. So I think it's almost a positive that you've got one.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that he'll go under his break even in opening round. So if that game goes ahead, watch this space. But if that is the case, then obviously, he'll get a huge double price rise, which will be easy to help step up, when you want to try and upgrade him. Finn O'Sullivan, look, I was a little bit, not mean's not the right word, but I wasn't as high or as big a fan of Finn O'Sullivan as some of the other characters out there. But, the journos have done a lot of their reporting. And once we saw him in North's best 22 in the intra-club and then in a practice game, and then obviously against West Coast, it seems like a wing role is going to be his. He's then going to push behind the ball and do what the recent North Melbourne draftees have done and hopefully rack up a lot of footy. Tiny flag that he did play against the Eagles, obviously in Bunbury, which is very unique circumstances in a preseason hit out. But I think he's someone that I'll be playing on my field and will do so with a big chunk of confidence. And then obviously when he gets, hopefully, defender status in round 6, could be a nice boost in our backline if we're still struggling to find some reliable scorers there. And then Harvey Langford, you're right, the role was a bit questionable yesterday in that hit against the Dockers, but he is a player that in a lot of keeper leagues I'm targeting because I think he has all the makings of a fantasy future star. He's got the frame, he's got the skill set. It might take a little while to translate in AFL and in his rookie season, but I still think that Melbourne are going to give him plenty of opportunities in year 1. So maybe after seeing him drop a measly score yesterday, we'll look at pushing him back onto the bench, but he's still someone that I would definitely want to be starting the year with.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and the thing is, he didn't play the 4th quarter, right? So maybe in 20 points, it might have got to a 55-60 as well, and we're probably not looking as bad. But the 3 in front of it is obviously the thing, I guess, that gets coached a little bit concerned. But I think he's still in their team. But yeah, Sam Lawler, obviously with the injury in the preseason, is he someone that if he was named round 1, could you consider starting after the half that you saw against West Coast, or is he the guy that if you start at O'Driscoll or you start a Sheldrick or you start a Hollands or a Peating or whoever that you'd be happy to downgrade to if he pops early?
I think I probably lean more towards the second scenario. And like until about a week ago when we had, call it a fortnight, when Jagger went down and Lawler went down, I had 3 midfield rookies just to give a peek behind the curtains of the large fries and Coke, and was very confident that between about 5 of these cash cows, I would be able to find 3 that I could field each week and have a bit of confidence, including one of your boys who we haven't mentioned yet. But I think Lawler and, a Sid Draper and a Jagger Smith, and the other guys who have mid status in Toby Travalia as well. There's a couple of these flags popping up that it seems like the safer choice is to go for an O'Driscoll or a Nevitt or a Sheldrick or something like that, and target one of those guys who are a little bit more expensive. And then all of a sudden, if you want to pivot to one of these rookies, you can A, make yourself some quick money, and B, maybe those, they're not even really mid prices, but these inflated cash cows, they might be able to have flattened out or had a stinker where it's an easy transition. So to answer your question, I'm going to find it very hard to leave Lawler out of my starting team, but given the injury and the fact that, Richmond want to keep this kid for 15 years, doesn't necessarily mean he'll be a sub risk, but they might just play him more forward instead of exposing him in the midfield with a lot more contests. So it's just something that I'm thinking about. I'll probably fade him and regret doing so.
Yeah. And the other thing I think people got to remember as well is that game we looked great. No Taranto, no Hopper. All their experienced players weren't playing. So I think that probably says a bit that he might have been playing a bit more of that 50-50 split, if not maybe 60-40 more forward potentially. But yeah, definitely someone I think to be watching. We'll move on to the new boy for my Crows, Sid Draper. I'll give my, quick 2 cents worth. Obviously, what do I know? I'm just a Crows fan. But I see him as a prime green vest candidate in round 1. The impact that he had against Brisbane was pretty stark and really, really good when he came on. He changed the game in terms of that midfield, and I think Crows can look at that and go, "Oh, that's perfect. Round 1 sub, bring him on in midway through the 3rd quarter, and away she goes." So I think he's a sub, and even if he's, and the thing is as well, I think there's even a slight chance he's not there, just because there was no Wayne Miller, No Max Michelani, if he's there round one. I think he will be, but he's obviously got an injury clad. And Josh Rochelle wasn't there. So who's going to go out of that Crows team there? Because there is a bit of a squeeze for spots, whether you like some of the players or not. There's a squeeze there, and who's going to be out? And if Draper's not coming until second half, he's one of the guys that's out, but he played that well that he's got to be hard to leave out as well. So what are your thoughts on a Sid Draper? Do you see him as that sub goal? Do you think he might be in the best 22 in round one?
I think you summed that up perfectly, mate. I think the role that he played against Brisbane indicates that is what Matty Nix wants to do with him starting round one. I have mentioned on most, if not all, of the podcasts I've done in the last couple of weeks, a trend that I've picked up with the Crows and Matty Nix is when they've got these rookies coming through, he tends to wrap them up a little bit in cotton wool to start their careers. Like you think last year to Dan Curtin, had a little bit of an interrupted preseason, but didn't get to see senior action for a while. You go back a year before that, Hugh Bond and Billy Dowling were putting up great numbers in the Sandful, and we didn't see either of them until last year when they came on. I think Zach Taylor as well fits exactly the same mold. So I think while Sid Draper's probably better than all of them at this early phase of his career, I still think that, again, like I said with Sam Lawler, these guys are going to be hopefully at your footy club for a decade. So the idea of Sid Draper going out there, going gangbusters, and then potentially putting his body under too much of a workload and injuring himself might be a red flag for Adelaide's medical staff and for their the coaching crew. So as a result, you're right, he might not be there round one. I think he will be the sub. But even if he's the sub, there's part of me that wants to pick him because, as you pointed out, when he came onto the ground, he literally almost changed the game single-handedly. There was a couple of other players that obviously helped contribute, but I think that Sid Draper is the arguably best player in the class. And as a result, as soon as he shakes that sub vest, we're going to have to put him onto our fields because he's going to put up some great numbers this year. Maybe that's me just trying to manifest it into positivity, but I do think that, Sid Draper's a future star of the fantasy competition.
Yeah, I'm loving hearing you say that as just a Crows fan, saying he might be one of the best, if not the best in draft class. That's fantastic. So hopefully he is that. But and he has had a managed preseason as well at the early stages. So that also is going to be in the thinking for the Crows, and the Crows are in win now as well. So it's not like when they drafted like a Rochelle type when near the bottom of the ladder, just play these kids, get games into them. I think that they're trying to be a bit more further in their rebuild and maybe, as you said, wrap these guys in cotton wool. So it'd be interesting to see if he's not. And the tough thing as well is we're not going to know because he plays on the Sunday, the first game on the Sunday. So are you really going to be passing up on another rookie that's playing earlier? I guess if you're looking at a guy that we'll get to in a Hugh Boxall as well, if you're starting him or Draper, play the same game, you have to have a look who's the sub and you pick the one that's not. But then again, if they're both sub, then where are you going? So that's going to be interesting. But I agree with Sid Draper. The final two of these more expensive rookies being Xavier Lindsay, who looked okay on a wing yesterday for Melbourne, and the other guy that played in that game for Freo was Murphy Reid, who obviously you know a bit about as well, being a Freo man. Any interest with these two guys? Obviously a bit more expensive than these guys, and it's almost like they're in that middle of, they're not like those other guys that are really in the basement price, but they're probably not as good as those guys that are in the 330, 320K range. So what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I think with Xavier Lindsay, I think he's going to have, it seems like Ed Langdon's going to be pushed inside a little bit more this year. So I wonder if Lindsay will get the opportunity to make one of those wings his own. Caleb Windsor kind of rolling down back. I watched the Dockers and D's game pretty comprehensively yesterday. So I do wonder, if Lindsay's going to be able to put up relevant fantasy numbers. He's a great option. If we didn't have a couple of these other aforementioned guys, but I feel much more confident with his teammate in Langford. I feel much more confident with Ashcroft, same with O'Sullivan. So, do you really want to pay up for four of these guys who are potentially 300K plus? Or, as you mentioned, should we look for a Hugh Boxall who can save you some money on the bench? There's a lot of coaches who might only be fielding two rookies in the midfield or one. So as a result, I think Lindsay just gets squeezed out of fantasy teams because of the options that we have, but wouldn't be surprised if he was another great cash generator and could end up being a bit of a rookie pod if people go down that route. Murphy Reid, he's a tricky one because I've been saying all preseason the role isn't there for him to play in the midfield, and as a result, I've kind of drawn a line through him. But With Hayden Young and Nat Fyfe out of the team yesterday, Reid still showed plenty of flashes of brilliance. Some of the stuff he's shown at the intra-club, it was great to see him translate that against an AFL team. So he might be someone that I'm sleeping on a little bit. And as a Dockers fan, I'm forever programmed to be a pessimist and to look at glass half empty. But hopefully we see Reid shake the vest and get an opportunity to thrive, not even in the midfield, but just to play a full game of footy. But I think he's destined, especially when Hayden Young comes back, to be, 5th or 6th in the pecking order in that midfield rotation. And as a result, as they kind of get games into him early and he develops the start of his AFL career, he's a prime sub candidate. So yeah, I'm cooling on Lindsay and Murphy Reid because we can't have them all. But if they're given the opportunity, they both should score considerably well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that a few people said as well that with rookies that you don't want to pick all of them because then if one fails or gets injured, where are you going to pivot to? Whereas and it was different when we had a Lawler and a Smiley and a Jagger Smith and Draper wasn't sub. When we had all these guys, you pick 4, 5, 6 of them. There was still probably 2 or 3 that you can't have and you can jump on. Whereas with a few of them not there, I agree. I think we're probably looking at a few less. I guess the final probably question with the midfield rookies is Hugh Boxall or Lucas Camporelli or both, because both look really good. Hugh Boxall's now impressed in both games, bit more forward in the last game, but I feel like St Kilda were trialing a few extra things than normal, like even well, obviously we're not going to talk about the prems here, but like an Asai Wanganeen Miller played CBAs and forward. That's not going to happen in the regular season. Boxall played a lot more forward. And then you look at Lucas Camporelli, who with Jagger Smith out, is he the guy that's come in and going to play on a wing? Like he looked good, 88 points, looked fantastic, and looks like he's got a pretty good kick on him as well. It's fairly accurate from the kicks I saw. So what are your thoughts on the two, and who would you be picking between the two if you could only pick one?
I'm leaning towards Boxall because I think that he's going to have a little bit more security in St Kilda's side, but there's not much splitting them, to be honest. And when I was doing all my draft prep a couple of months ago, I remember looking at both the Camberley twins and being like, all right, yep, Lucas looks pretty good, but Ben is the one that I'm really excited to watch. And then didn't get to watch most of the GWS Carlton game and check the score at halftime or three-quarter time. And I was like, what's he doing near the top of the pecking order? This was not on my bingo card. So, look, if you needed to save the money to potentially turn a mid-price or a fallen premium to a gun or move one of these rookies into a player that you really love, like you could quite easily chop out a Lindsay or a Murphy Reid or even a Sid Draper, who we've talked about with that sub risk, and maybe put your M 9 and 10 as Camberley and Boxall, and you'd be laughing. But I think Camberley just reeks of a potential sub. I know I swear we mention a sub risk with 80% of these rookies, but it's true because when they start their AFL careers, particularly, the time on ground percentage is usually something that we try to watch the most, because if they're playing a lot of time on ground, it probably indicates that, they have an improved tank. But if they're in the sub vest, it's hard for them to obviously register that high time on ground. The good news is, I guess, that hit out between Carlton and Richmond is the first one of the year. So we'll know if Camberley is going to start as a sub or not, because if not, I feel confident in picking him. And the similar with Boxall, who's different type of player, more inside than outside, but as you said, was able to push forward and hit the scoreboard against Port Adelaide, which is something that not many St Kilda players managed to do. Was near best on ground in the Waffle Grand Final for the Colts as well. I watched him pretty closely and have a little bit of inside scoop about him being, a ready-made footballer rolling into St Kilda's team. So I think he was one I was high on no matter where he got drafted. And I think that obviously with St Kilda chasing a few extra pieces in that midfield following the retirements of Seb Ross and Brad Crouch, Boxall might get a real opportunity to shine early. So I've got him slightly ahead, but I think both of them present ripper value as a bench option.
Yeah, well, Camberley was top scorer for Carlton in that pretty low scoring game against the US, and Hugh Boxall was 1 point behind the equal fourth highest scorers for St Kilda in a bad day for them, and they're not going to be that bad. I can't see in the season when they get Marsh and Sinclair back. So, yeah, Boxall for me is definitely someone I'm pretty keen on, and Camberley. The final thing I just want to touch on with those two before we quickly go on the names of the midfield was Boxall plays on Sunday, Camberley plays Thursday. Even if you prefer Boxall, if Camberley is not named the sub in round one, obviously big if, would you then just jump on Camberley instead of taking I guess, we don't think Boxall's going to be the sub, but in the slight chance he is, would you rather just get the guy that's not sub, or would you, and just bank that guy that's not sub against Richmond as well? Or would you still go Boxall if you prefer him?
It's a good question. I think given the opponent and, the fact that you have to lock him in before 90% of your team, I would probably go Camberelli, because there's no guarantee that Boxall is going to be that rookie, and there's no guarantee that he's going to dodge the subvest. So there's so many if, buts, and whats around these players. So if you have more information and the more things that are confirmed, I guess helps make you an evaluated pick. That sounds right. But yeah, I would probably go Camberelli if he wasn't the sub on that Thursday night. But again, there's a couple of those other guys that I probably feel a bit safer paying up for, depending on how many rookies you've got on the field. I do like a lot of these, call it first round draft picks from the most recent class. Like if we were lumping these guys together in with Sid Draper and Sid managed to shake the vest, then he's definitely someone I would pick. So yeah, to answer your question, I think if Camberelli dodges the vest, then I'd pick him over Boxall.
Yeah, I think I agree as well. Moving to just, I guess, the rookies that are the other names that people are considering, because we've covered pretty much a lot of these mid rookies as my app for some reason closed. So now I've got to try and get all the midfield rookies that I had ready to go. Got to try and get them up here. So there's one there we'll touch on a couple there we'll touch on in the forwards as well. But obviously the other one we didn't mention with the injury was Leo Lombard as well. He was someone that opening round we could have had a look at. If he went well, we could have picked, but obviously he's out with the shoulder injury there. But in terms of the other mid rookies, Clay Hall probably doesn't look like he's going to be there for West Coast. Didn't play on the weekend, and along with a Grego who didn't come on yesterday, so he's another one that probably won't be there either unless something drastically changed there. And there's a fair few of these mid forwards that we'll obviously touch on in the forward line. So there's not actually many of the other players here. There's not actually any other names besides an Angus Hastie is the other guy, that another 230k St Kilda rookie. Feels like we've got a plethora of those at the moment. But any of those guys sort of interest for you, and probably I guess Hastie being the one maybe that might be of interest?
Yeah, had a couple of games last year, and I think there was a few, if not most of his games were sub-affected, whether that was subbed on or subbed off. So I don't know if he's done enough over the preseason to push himself further up the pecking order at St Kilda. So for that reason, I'd probably still have the other 230k guys we talked about in Boxall and Camberelli ahead of him. And then obviously the other draftees that we've talked about ahead of those guys. So Hastie's someone that if he still had defender status, which from memory he had last year, he might be garnering a bit more attention, but not for me.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. So who'd be your top three mid rookies? Is it the three that we started off with? And if so, which order would you have them in?
I think so. I think I'd go Levi Ashcroft, Finn O'Sullivan, and then Harvey Langford. And then fourth and fifth, if I had to try and rank them, a bit of a trickier task. And I'll give Sid Draper the fifth spot purely because I think he's going to pay dividends over the course of the season. But I think I've got Boxall fourth because if he's given the opportunity and not in a vest, I think that he has access to a lot of points over someone like Murphy Reed or an Xavier Lindsay or a few of the other characters we've talked about. If there were more to pick from and more of these first rounders managed to dodge the injury bullet, then they'd probably push him down the pecking order. But at 230k, I think he's the best of the basement options at the moment.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I guess Camberelli would be number 6 if you were putting a 6th guy there as well. And if he's not the sub, he might even move up. So, I would agree with that list as well. If Finn O'Sullivan's got this half-back role, I'd almost
he could be one. I agree.
I think his job security is probably the best of those top three. It's just that Levi Ashcroft, I guess the pedigree and the upside is there. But I've even hearing listen to a pod with, I think it was DT Lemon and Mini Monk, and obviously Mini Monk saying about how like Levi Ashcroft might get some of these sub vests because obviously we've seen Brisbane have been able to manage players because I guess they're in a position to do that. So does he get a green vest? Does he get a red vest? There's maybe not the first couple of rounds, unless he gets an opening round, then obviously we'll know. But I think with the buy in round 3, maybe it might be after that. But yeah, that's, I guess, something. Whereas I can't see O'Sullivan getting any sub games or anything like that. So
I don't think so. And all we need is Levi to get one vest, whether it's green or red, and that can stall his cash generation, maybe before he even hits the 500k mark. And then you're left kind of wondering if you want to trade him out or if you keep going to field him, because these guys are obviously going to be giving us points on field as well. And if O'Sullivan's playing drifting back as well as starting on a wing, then he has, I guess, access to easier points than Ashcroft. I think it's fair to say that Ashcroft's probably got a better pedigree scoring-wise. But, yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch those two out of the gates and see who emerges as the best rook.
Yeah, exactly. Rucks, we're not going to touch on it a heap. I just want to quickly get your thoughts on it because Liam Reedy's just over, so I think he's 402K, just over the rookie price. And then Harry Boyd, obviously, is obviously with the buzz because we think he's going to be there round one if Marshall obviously being managed and with obviously Mitch Owens now injured. Whether he plays or not, we don't know yet. But if he's out, that's another forward. Marshall might play there. And then Archer Reed as well as the other one that I guess one of those West Coast guys might not play early. Is Harry Boyd your favourite? Is Liam Reedy worth paying up for that 402K price tag? What are your thoughts with those three quickly?
As the weekend eventuated, I was very ready to save enough money so that I had Liam Reedy at R3. And then on Sunday, we were all given a reminder that he is really a waffle grade ruckman. I still think that he's going to have some games where he scores well, but he just got poured an absolute bath against Max Gawn. And I think while Freo probably won't rush Sean Darcy back into the team, it just scares me if we were to pay up for Reedy and he scored a 20 or a 30, something of that sort, and then got subbed off the ground, or even worse, then he obviously, like, the point of paying up for him is null and void. So I think he's someone that some coaches still will pay up for, and it might work, but I can't see him pushing his average much higher over a 60, 65 range. Out of the options we've talked about, I feel the most confident in Harry Boyd's scoring, but obviously we don't really know what his role is going to be like if Marshall plays, if Marshall doesn't. How long is that going to last? You know, he might be solo ruck round one, sitting on our bench, score 90. Everyone rushes to bring him in, and then he's dumped in week 3. So he obviously comes with a couple of risks, but I think that I have him. He's still at my R3 at the moment, and if he plays round one, he'll stay there. But I also am quite bullish on Archer Reed. I think that he can play a variety of roles for West Coast, and we saw Matt Flynn get the dominant lion's share of the ruck contests against North and Tristan Cherry, but Reed can pinch hit and hopefully relieve Flynn at times. Bailey Williams is also in the team, so I wonder how they're going to structure up with those bigs. But if Archer Reed's named round one, I think he's a talent and can hopefully score. I mean, outside of those guys, there's not really anyone we love. So if Archer Reed is a green dot and Harry Boyd's not there, I'll probably chase the green dot over Harry Boyd. But yeah, I won't be expecting great numbers from him out of the gate.
Yeah, and that was a question I was actually going to ask you if Boyd isn't named, because there is still a world that that's the case, that if Boyd's not named and they just name Marshall and have him as solo ruck, if he wasn't to be named, would you then pay up for Liam Reedy? And if you don't, is Archer Reed worth putting on your bench? Because I feel like he could just be a 30 averaging guy and not make a lot of cash, and I think then the red dot would be a bit more valuable. Would you agree with that red dot? And then would you pay it for Reedy if Boyd's not named?
It's tricky because, you know, we all say we want 30 green dots to start the year, and then that R3 spot tends to be where we say, you know, there's no really reliable rookies. I may as well just pick a R3 who's got a lot of Sunday games with forward status and use him as a potential loop piece. So I think it's a large reason why myself and a lot of coaches had Harry Barnett sitting there last year. I poo-pooed Liam Reedy and shut him down pretty quickly. But like I said, there is access to points. He's going to get a lot of hit outs. Maybe he does prove to be someone, that we he ends up scoring in good doses, but I'm not convinced. So if Harry Boyd's not named, Archer Reed isn't exactly a home run pick. So I haven't dove into the schedule and fixturing yet, but St Kilda and West Coast traditionally do play a lot of those Sunday games. So maybe even if one of those guys isn't picked, you could pick them at R3. Yeah.
Livingston's probably the R3 I'd probably pick. A lot of Sunday games and
further down the depth chart
as well. Yeah. So yeah, no, very interesting. I think it's a very interesting topic. A lot of people like the double crack at the vice captain and captain, and a lot of people like the 30 green dots. I think with the early buys, you literally just have to pick a captain for round one, and by the time round 5 hits, we've probably got a red dot somewhere anyway. So I like the 30 green dots. So yeah, very, very interesting there. Moving on to the and another one just to keep an eye on for later in the years, maybe a Lachie McAndrew for the Crows.
Yep.
I like Riley O'Brien in terms of he's given a lot to the Crows over his career, and he's played in a struggling team for a lot of it as well. I just know that the Crows, if they aren't going great, they normally use Rob as a bit of a scapegoat. They drop him and they bring obviously Strawny in, but obviously he's on the inactive list. So I wouldn't like it if Crows are doing bad. Lockie McAndrew is a guy that could get a debut at some point. So just someone to have on the watch list. He's 302K, I believe, the price. So just someone to keep an eye on there. I hope he's not playing this year. Future years, yes, because he's 24, but obviously we'll see as well. Because if he's not playing, it means the Crows are doing pretty well.
Yeah, just a couple of other names to monitor. Kale Gerain, I think that's how you pronounce it, out of West Perth. He got drafted to Essendon. Shows more as a forward, but absolutely monstered kids in the Colts Carnival. So I think he could be someone that if he plays, might be able to generate some points. And Tom Sims, who got drafted to Richmond as a ruck forward, we know that they're going to play a lot of kids. He did play against Collingwood, albeit put up a pretty dismal score, but he might be another player who's given an extended opportunity. Might not be for a month or two, but he could be another player that generates us a little bit of cash in a position that's usually neglected.
Yeah, exactly. Final position, which will be the forwards. So we'll start off here. So I guess that the first question I'll ask you, Sam Davidson, can he be our F6? Because he looked pretty good against Hawthorn down at Pig Park, and I know there's a lot of injuries at Dogs, but Hawthorn are generally a pretty hard team to score against. I know it's a pre-season game, but at the end of the day, put up a 102, and we do see these players, and a few people have said, could this be like the Nick Martin of this year? Like, probably not going to be as good as Nick Martin, because Nick Martin's a superstar. Well, star, very good player. Superstars for the top ones. Probably going to be
borderline superstar.
There. Yeah, exactly. Very, very good player. But anyways, moving on from that, Sam Davidson, could you put him at F6?
Look, you can. I haven't pulled the trigger and done the move myself, but I think that I would not be shocked if we got 2 or 3 weeks into the season and everyone was scrambling to find a way to put him on the field. He's rather than Nick Martin. The one that comes to mind for me is Sean Manor, and he was someone that I talked a lot of coaches into picking at the start of the season because I watched him in the VFL final, the grand final in 2023. That would have been, and I was really bullish on making sure that you had him in your team. Obviously played early, didn't come back into the team until about round 15 or 16, but then was gangbusters. Davidson's a little bit different. Like, he's probably not as much of a dynamic scoreboard impact type guy, but he does give me a lot of similar vibes. He's also a mature ager. There's a lot of injuries obviously going on to the Bulldogs engine room, so Davidson's going to be given a ton of opportunity out of the gate. He's sitting at F7 for me at the moment, but like I said, I wouldn't be stunned, and I'm somewhat half expecting him to force our hand and find a way that we can bring him onto our field because he looks like a jet.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the other two guys, we'll start at the bottom with the forwards because I felt there's a few of these good real basement options, which is a Connor Stone. So not really a rookie, but he's obviously had a few years in the system, but he's playing a half-back role and looking pretty good. And even a Max Hall as well, a mid-season draftee from last year, has been getting some games and looked good against Carlton, not as much against Port Adelaide. Again, as I said, probably a bit of an asterisk on that game. Just one player scored over 82 points. That was Jack McRae. Everyone else scored pretty much below 70. So I'd be probably just putting asterisks on that game in terms of scores. But I guess thoughts on Connor Stone, then your thoughts on a Max Hall as well. He's got the mid-forward status, which could be handy as well.
Yeah, Stone is the other forward that I've got on my bench at the moment. All pre-season, I've had Elijah Hewitt and Dan Curtin sitting there. And then over the last week, both of those spots have been taken up by Davidson and Connor Stone. I think with the defender status, Connor Stone should hopefully get that in round 6. He might only average, like he scored on the weekend, a 51 or in the low 50s, but I do think that that's still going to be an asset for our fantasy sides because some of those expensive guys that I just mentioned and we'll continue to touch on, there are some concerns about them, especially from a scoring standpoint. So as it stands right now, I've got Connor Stone in my forward line, and Max Hall, he's a tricky one because he dominated for Boxwood, Hawthorn's VFL team.
Box Hill.
I was close. Yeah. So he dominated for them before getting drafted. And then when he came to St Kilda, kind of shifted roles a little bit. He was a primary midfield usage guy, but then he played a bit more of that half forward for Sandringham. And it seems like that's a similar type of role he's going to play with St Kilda. And it kind of is a bit of an omen. I think that, in year one, pre-season game, it's take it with a grain of salt because it was a game they got given a bath in, you're right. But Hugh Boxall was the one who was kind of pushing inside and getting those midfield minutes while they kept Hall kind of in that forward half role. So I don't think they've got room for both of them, especially when you throw a Hasty in there. There's a lot of St Kilda kids fighting for maybe 1 or 2 spots. So for that reason, I'm kind of fading Max Hall to start the year. Hopefully, if he puts up numbers in the VFL and goes gangbusters, then he can be a decent trade target for us and when he earns a promotion. But yeah, I have Davidson clear number 1 and Connor Stone ahead of Max Hall out of the 230k guys anyway.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I guess the good thing with the Max Hall and obviously with the St Kilda guys is round 3, they've got Richmond. So when we've got a few of these bye players, they would be decent cover. But yeah, just something to have a look at there as well. Just as because obviously forwards, I think it's better that we'll move slowly up. So you got like a Corey Warner who's been looking pretty good in these games and could get a bit of a go as a high half forward for Sydney there. Cody Ango was good in the first game, didn't come on until late in the game against Carlton. So does that maybe scream a little bit of, is he the guy that's in the vest in round 1 as well? They're probably the 2 guys below 300k. Then you get into, I guess, the big 3. So before we get into those 3, what are your thoughts on a Warner and an Angove?
Yeah, I was really impressed with what I saw from Warner against Gold Coast, someone that I've definitely bumped up my tiers that I do on the Patreon page. I think that we could see him, like you said, playing that half-forward role. I think I still feel a bit better chasing the 230k guys and banking just that little bit of extra cash. One other thing that we didn't mention with the Giants is they've obviously got a couple of characters. I keep using characters now. I can't unhear it. Who are suspended out of the gate as well. So, that probably bodes well for James Leake, Cody Angove, Connor Stone. But when those players are available again and Tom Green gets back to full fitness, I wonder if they might become red dots very quickly in the season. It's just a tiny flag. And I think of those, of that group, Cody Angove is probably the first one out the door. So another kid that played with Hugh in that Claremont Colts premiership winning team that I keep referencing. But I think, we probably didn't see enough. And as you mentioned, only came on late against Carlton, which probably indicates that best case scenario, he's going to be the sub. So, I like Corey Warner. Don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger on him, but I'm probably fading Cody Angove.
Yeah. And then I guess the 3 that are in and around that 300k mark, Joe Berry, Dan Curtin, and Isaac Kako. I think Kako's in a different bucket because I think his job security is rock solid and he's got opening round. If he puts up a big score, I think you pick him depending on what that score is. And then you got Dan Curtin, who's a Crows fan. I think he'll be a very good player, but I just don't think he's going to be a consistent enough score for us this year. I think he's going to have some low scores. And then Joe Berry, a little bit similar as well, maybe a bit better just because he will get high up the ground or whatever. But what are your thoughts on those 3? And do you think, that opening round score for Kako could be something that we need to really keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think if Kako does come out and I wrote these preseason notes for that game and said, wouldn't be surprised if this 81-point effort was the highest score we see from him this year. But he looked great in doing that. And maybe I'm selling him a bit short. Traditionally, small forwards aren't players that produce great fantasy numbers. But again, as you mentioned, if he comes out in round 0 and gets close to 70 points, I think everyone will try and find a way to put him onto their bench, maybe even squeeze him into an on-field spot, depending on how you're structuring up. But he's someone that I'll be watching intently. If that score is, I'd probably call the benchmark a 60. If it's in the 50s, I'm probably not as bullish, even though he will go up a little bit. But we'll have to wait and see how that eventuates. Dan Curtin, I agree with kind of what you said. And often I get sucked into watching some of these players and thinking, they're going to be a real talent. But I kind of forget that has to translate to fantasy success. So I agree with you. I think Dan Curtin's going to be a great addition to Adelaide's senior team. I think he's, a real unique talent as well, quite imposing size-wise, not exactly a key forward, but can be thrown in the middle and wreak havoc at times. So I think for that reason, the scoring will be a little bit inconsistent, especially as he tries to find his niche and his role in that senior team, and that'll probably see him thrown around a little bit. So someone that I've chopped out of my team at the moment. And then Joe Berry, I think he probably falls a little bit of a bracket underneath Kako. Job security seems fine. Scoring seems fine. But I think with Port Adelaide probably all in on a premiership tilt, his development probably isn't at the top of their priority list at the moment. So as a result, I'm probably ranking him a little bit further behind some of these other forwards. Elijah Hewitt's the other one we haven't touched on, who obviously didn't play on the weekend, was in the B team, according to reports out of West Coast's intra-club. So I do wonder if, maybe he won't be a player who's a sub candidate or starting in the green vest, but he's someone that they're going to try and be really cautious with how he plays early in the season and throughout the bulk of this year, really, because injury has been the narrative his career so far. So maybe that means he's a sub-off candidate, plays a half here or there or 3/4, best case scenario. So out of all of that group, the inflated forward rookies, I'm probably pushing them to the side because we have cheaper options that I have confidence in. And Kako's the only one that if he puts numbers on the board in opening round that I'd consider.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. And I guess that with Elijah Hewitt, again, we mentioned it a bit with like a Boxall as well, playing on a Sunday, and a Sid Draper. It's even worse for a guy like Elijah Hewitt plays the final game of the round as well. So that's the tough thing, is that I feel like he's just an automatic no, you can't start him, because if he's the sub in that final game, that's already a trade you have to make next week to get rid of him and jump on the guy there. And I'm not sure we're starting him. If we see a good game from him and he plays well, then he's a guy we probably jump on. But I feel like you probably don't. And then just with Kako quickly as well, the flag I would say is that we're obviously talking about if he goes a big score. Obviously, we know about Queensland with the weather. This game's on Saturday afternoon. True. If it's going to be even raining still, I still wouldn't be. I know he scored well. He was pretty good against Bulldogs in the wet weather, but you probably wouldn't be thinking much more than the 50 or even a 60 for that matter that in that weather. So, yeah, just a bit of a flag on him. Final sort of two guys we'll touch on with the forward rookies is Reef McInnes has found a new home in defence for Collingwood and been pretty good as that sort of third tall for them back there. And then also a Jack Hutchinson as well, who's been a guy that a lot of people have been keen on in the preseason, but seems to be a lot more of a wing role, and West Coast seem to be playing a lot quicker, obviously with Minnie McWalter coming from Richmond. That's been the game style they've played, so maybe not going to score as much and probably not getting midfield minutes with a few guys ahead of him. Any interest maybe in paying for Hudson on the bench? And Reef McInnes obviously a bit dependent as well on his opening round score, but any interest with those two?
Not a ton. I mean, Reef McInnes, I think, performed solid in that game against Richmond and could be someone that provides us with some scoring out of the bench. But I do think, those key backs, again, are just not players that I usually want to try and target and covet. Could be handy if, starts as a forward and gains defender status for your flexibility, but not really someone that I've been contemplating or targeting. So as a result, I'm steering clear of him. Who's the other bloke you mentioned? Sorry.
Sorry, just having a drink of water. It was a worst time possible to throw back to me. So, but there you go. Yeah. It was Jack Hutchinson.
Yeah, so he's a player that honestly was sitting at F6 at times for me throughout the preseason. It's now a place occupied by Hugo Garcia, but I think that, the scoring was okay against North Melbourne, but it seems like he's still going to be a bit more outside than inside, even if he is playing in the midfield and on a wing consistently. Was drafted as a forward as well, which is in the back of my mind. I know that Minnie doesn't seem like he's going to throw the magnet and move these players around a lot, but, if injury strikes for whatever reason and Oscar Allen has to go back, maybe that means that Hutchinson's someone that goes forward. So I just wonder if there's going to be enough points up for grabs for him already at a bit of an inflated price tag to really succeed. And, you can chop Hutchinson out, go to Davidson and save 150 grand. That's not nothing. So, yeah, probably someone that I deservedly was getting a bit of buzz earlier in the preseason. But, I think there's better options around the price mark.
Yeah, I think I agree. Got one question after we do the rank suite with forwards, but who would be your top three forward rookies? I think we've touched on, obviously, the top two, but who would be the three?
I think we got Davidson 1. And then I'm probably steering towards Stone 2. And again, this is taking all things into consideration. Like being basement priced obviously frees up a lot of cash elsewhere. I'm still a bit bullish on Elijah Hewitt as number 3. And he might be someone that we view as a downgrade target. And hopefully he gets nursed through the first couple of weeks of the season and kind of keeps his potential value. And then outside of that, a Kako scoring well in opening round could make him a tempting pick. Dan Curtin seems like he's got job security, so maybe.
Warner and Reef McInnes both obviously another two that play opening round as well. So,
yeah, I think Warner is someone that, I would probably want to see it a little bit more. Obviously, that preseason game against Gold Coast, like I said, visually, I remember half watching the TV and being like, oh, who's 37 again? I haven't noticed that bloke before. So he stood out. Just signed a contract extension as well to try and keep the Warner Bros United in Sydney. So the show of faith might mean that hopefully he is given more leash and a bit more of an opportunity in Sydney's senior team. So, yeah, Warner, you could throw a couple of them into the basket there, but I'd probably go Davidson, Stone, Hewitt, maybe on the potential upside, Warner, and then he's kind of tied with Kako, depending on what those guys dish up in opening round.
Yep, yeah. I think the top two are fairly clear. I think Davidson and Stone, and I feel like Warner could pop a 70 or 80 in this game this week and be the guy that we really bump up there. So that's the interesting thing. And obviously Kako, another one. But I feel, and this is leading me to my question, is that I feel confident in two rookies, but the third one is a bit dicey in terms of their scoring potential. I've currently got Davidson on field, and a few people are going that way as well with the one forward rookie. But if one of those forward rookies fail, there's probably not a huge amount of names we're confident in jumping on straight away. True. Is that you've obviously got Garcia at F6 and a few people even looked at like a Bailey Humphrey if he goes well in opening round, and a few of these expensive guys. Are you leaning more towards still playing a Davidson at F6 and just putting, I guess, a guy like a Joe Berry on the bench, or would you be much happier putting a Davidson Stone on the bench? And then if one of these other rookies goes well, you can then downgrade someone to move the bits around. That's, I guess, it's just, are you confident in a third forward rookie having in your team, or do you think it's the two and we're looking elsewhere unless one of these guys pops in opening round?
I think it's the two for me, which is a large reason why I've got Garcia at F6, even after Davidson's Ripper preseason game. It just gives me a lot more flexibility if Elijah Hewitt is sub or isn't sub, or Curtin, whatever role he plays. You know, we've seen them throughout the preseason and we've read all these track reports, and you've done some great research and reporting yourself, mate, that I and a lot of the fantasy community have been glued to. But once we see them in round one, that'll give us a real test of, okay, this is most likely what we're going to see moving forward. Similar with the opening round guys in Kako and Warner. So I think you can go those cheap guys on your bench, but if you've got one of them in the forward line on field, like you said, doesn't give you a lot to pivot to, and you have to pay up even if you want to go to a Kako or a Hewitt or up to Hutchinson or Garcia, who are a little bit more inflated. So for that reason, I probably feel a bit safer. Maybe we throw another one into the utility spot. The beauty of having that is we might be able to slide Kako into that spot if he goes really well in opening round, and that gives us a bit of a emergency or a backup. So yeah, I feel more confident personally about having those guys on my bench, but yeah, watch Hugo Garcia come out and get 40 points while Davidson has 150.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like round one, you could even Levi Ashcroft does have Sydney, so that's a bit of a flag as well in round one. So maybe you could have Levi Ashcroft on the bench in round one, put Davidson on your field, and put Garcia into the midfield, and then that week after flick it back around and put Garcia on your forward line and maybe put Davidson on the bench. So that's something that I've also looked at as well. So yeah, very, very interesting with our rookies there. So to finish off though, because obviously we're going for an hour, so really good chat in depth with these rookies. Who have you currently got on field for the rookies, and who are you confident in fielding at the moment? So number of rookies, and then who are you confident fielding?
So I've got one in the back line, two in the midfield, and one in my forward line. No, Hugo Garcia is my F6.
I wouldn't count him, is it? Yeah.
Nah, so three in that case. And I think that's because, much like a lot of other coaches at the moment, we're really trying to chase some of this value in players that, we wouldn't usually shop with. So Garcia, perfect example, not rookie priced, but not too far separated from that bracket. Nathan O'Driscoll in the midfield as well.
Humphrey,
there's a lot of
Nevitt, Sheldrick. That's heaps.
There's a lot of them going around. So Pryor's my D6, and then at the moment I've got O'Sullivan and Ashcroft at M7 and M8. But I'm sure, much like everyone, over the next 10 days I'll continue to tweak and tinker with my structure. And if I get, maybe Matty Nix comes out in a press conference and says, no, Sid Draper is primed and ready to go for round one, he's going to be starting in our 22, maybe then that'll force my hand and I'll want to get him on the field. So there's still a lot to play out, but I think the value of some of these guys who are, not stereotypical mid prices, but also not rookie priced, has given coaches a little bit more flexibility and been able to push a couple of our rookies off the field. So 3 for me at the moment, which feels very bizarre. I think usually it takes me to about round 17 to have 3 rookies on my field. So hopefully it means that, I've changed something up and it's going to lead to a hat or even better.
Yeah, exactly. I've got the one in defense, one in the midfield and one in the forward line. So I've got the 3 as well. But If Pride doesn't get done opening round, I think I'm probably going to have to go maybe even a DeConey if he goes, or even a Joel Frazier at that D6 because there's no one else. So maybe it's going to be none in the back line, and then maybe I adjust to 2 in the midfield and 1 up forward. But there's also a chance I have none in the forward line, put Garcia there and have 2 in the midfield and 1 in defence. So I think 3 is where I'm looking at. And I know Tom, obviously, Hales, obviously second overall last year, has said that he likes to start 1 less rookie than a lot of us, and even a Chris who won it as well, started a lot of mid prices. And I can't remember exactly how many he had, but I know he didn't have as many as well. So I think it's better to have 1 less, and then you can always pivot to putting an extra rookie on field, because then you can downgrade a mid price to a rookie, upgrade the other one to a premium. So I feel like 4 is what a lot of people are going with. 3 is probably the 1 less. I wouldn't be going 2 or less, because that means your team's probably too mid-priced heavy. And I feel like if you're going 6 or more, that's probably 2 guns and rookies. And I don't know if we've got enough on-field scoring rookies that we're confident in to start anyway at the start of the season to go that past. So I feel like, the sweet spot's probably 4 or 3, and 5 is probably the first I'd go. Would you agree with that? Probably 3 to 4 is probably what you'd be looking at?
Yeah, if we still had Travalia, not a sub-risk, Sid Draper, same basket, an injury not to Lombard or Jagger Smith, then there's probably Lawler, Smiley. There's probably, a world where we could be fielding 5 and be confident that those guys would be great cash generators. But I think, again, because there's a couple of these players who are starting to drop like flies, premiums and rookies alike, it's forcing us to kind of hunt for value in different areas that maybe we wouldn't usually look at. So 3 to 4 feels like the sweet spot. But again, opening round score might change a couple of those bits and pieces. We might only have 2 or 1, and that might still be the right formula. So still plenty to pay out before round 1 kicks off. Yeah,
exactly. Beautiful, Fry, mate. I very much appreciate this chat. So obviously, it's helped me as well, but it's also hopefully helped a lot of listeners out there really get into the nitty-gritty of the rookies. And I think it's the perfect time of the year as well to chat rookies, because this is when we're looking at rookies dictating our structure. And obviously, we've got a few rookies with the opening round score might pop, and maybe we've got to adjust, but I don't know if it's going to be too drastic. And I feel like that a lot of these are names. So, mate, thank you very much for jumping on for the chat, mate. Where can the Pill find you across the socials? And also a bit of a plug for your Patreon as well, mate. Hopefully people can go sign up there for you. Where can people find that, and also the podcast?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. I always love catching up, and not only are these podcasts great, but we usually chew each other's ear for 30 or 40 minutes pre-pod and talk tactics and catch up. So really appreciate you having me on. You can obviously find me at Sports by Fry on all your socials. Fantasy Sports by Fry is the name of my Patreon page. I'm going to be doing all sorts of stuff throughout the season. I did notes on each of the Amy Community Series games, did an hour podcast with one of my best mates who's a bit of a, how would I word it? Not an experienced fantasy coach. So, more a fantasy 101 blueprint. So if you've missed a big chunk of the preseason stuff, you can check that out. And then, I'll have plenty of information on rookies and cash cows throughout the year behind the paywall.
No, make sure you guys go and subscribe. That link's in the description for that as well, so you guys can go check that out as well. And even if you just want to go and support the great man Fry for all the rookie stuff he does, make sure you just go and do that. And if you want extra content, then you can do it as well. So a few reasons why you should go over and subscribe to his Patreon. And also make sure you subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/AFL Fantasy Fanatics. Cash League still there. Obviously got to be a Patreon before round 1. So still just over a week to go. So make sure you get involved there. The more people that register, the bigger the cash prize as well, and potentially second and third will also get a bit of a prize there as well. So make sure you go and subscribe there. Plenty of exclusive Q&A pods, and the only place you can see my team reveal post opening round as well. I'll be doing that for the Patreon people there. So if you'd like to see all that sort of stuff and in-season content, head over there as well. Let us know in the comments below how many rookies you guys are starting on field. I'd be really keen to know how many guys you guys starting on field. So comment how many rookies you got in field, and even if put the names that you're confident in as well. And any questions you've got as well, feel free to send those through as well. You can find me at BAILSDT, and you can find us at AFL Fantasy Fans. As I said, smash a like on the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening back to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. That would be very much appreciated. And make sure you tune in tonight. We got Drew Jones from Fox Footy. Obviously, just got to get a double confirmation that he's going to be there. But at this stage, he'll be on, and we'll be doing a Q&A with him as well, picking his brain about what he's looking to do in his own team and the things that he's seen in the preseason. So looking forward to that one. But yeah, until that, guys, have a good afternoon. We'll catch you guys later on tonight. So thanks, everyone. See ya.
See ya.